Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of all of us at the National Glass Association, thank you for making time in your day to join us for today's Thirsty Thursday, a special feature of a presentation given live during the NGA Glass Conference Chicago, which occurred in July this year. It is an important and highly relevant topic with very exciting breaking news to accompany it, so we're glad you're choosing to join us. NGA is the proud sponsor of the North American Pavilion at GlassTech. If you'll be in Dusseldorf, be sure to stop by NGA's booth in Hall 13, booth C48-2. We also invite you to join the glass and glazing industry in person at North America's largest industry trade show, GlassBuild America. Network with potential glass and material suppliers, learn about the new technologies and products coming to market, and discuss solutions to your pressing design challenges. We'd love to see you in Vegas, October 18th to 20th. Full trade show access for all 3 days is less than $100 or free for NGA members. Visit glassbuildamerica.com to learn more. Save the dates of January 23rd to 26th for the upcoming NGA Glass Conference, Miramar Beach, near Destin, Florida. Registration will open soon, and you can count on all the same festivities typical of our winter conference, including the member celebration dinner, fun run and walk, and golf scramble, not to mention the important conversations that happen both in and out of the meeting rooms. Block your calendar now and look for registration to officially open in the coming months. This course is accredited by NGA for 1 hour of AIA HSW credit. AIA credit and certificates of completion are available upon request. Simply email sarah@glass.org as listed on the screen. Tino Amode is Chief Technical Officer and co-founder of Armored One, specializing in active shooter and security education, planning, and solutions. Tino is the lead researcher and developer of all of Armored One's glass products, which has allowed him to break barriers and set new standards in the shooter attack certified glass and film market. Fueled by his passion to save lives, Tino has led his team of chemists, active shooter experts, glass and film experts to create the very first bullet-resistant and fire-rated glass in the world. His ability to understand architectural needs and challenges and pair it with tactical obligations is the driving force behind Armored One's product development. Julia Schimmelpenny is the Architectural Technical Engagement Manager for Eastman Chemical Company. She has more than 30 years experience in laminated glass in support of glass fabricators, architects, designers, engineers, and specifiers. Her work includes new product qualification and commercialization, regulatory development, and industry support for laminated glazing solutions. Julia also manages the America's Customer Support Laboratories in the US and Brazil. Being very active in the glazing industry, she currently serves as the EO6 chair and is on the board of directors for ASTM International. Please help me welcome Tino and Julia.
Thank you for everybody here at the NGA that's allowing me to present about something that's been pretty much my passion for the last 10 years of what we've been working on here at Armored One, and also is growing to become my passion personally to really try to lead the fight into creating better environments for our kids, especially in K through 12 schools. And it's really what our passion, our mission, and what drives us every single day. And so when Irmela said that I had the chance to speak with you guys, I was pretty excited about it because not so much of what we do product-wise, but really wanted to educate this group on what's really going on with the history of active shooters and where we're going and how it's getting worse and not getting better. Just click through. Just really quickly about me. So I'm the Chief Technical Officer at Armored One. Armored One, we have 3 pillars at our company. We have assess, train, and protect are our 3 pillars. We do security assessments. We do security training for active shooter. And then we also do glass products as well. We were founded on the base of being active shooter experts. So there's a lot of us for the company that are either retired military, retired police, on the SWAT team, have been deemed by experts, by federal government. We really come with an active shooter background first and kind of got into the glass industry. I was talking with a few people, and I feel like the common trend about getting in the glass business is the glass business chooses you, you don't choose the glass business. And so that's how I feel like I got into it as well, is we really didn't go out there to get into the glass business. We really went out there to make change in our K through 12 schools to help educate on a local level, and then realize that glass is one of the easiest ways to get into buildings, get into cars, get into residential homes. And we just felt like we could do better. We felt like we could help try to create some sort of minimum consensus standard across the board, not realizing at that time how hard that is. And so having the support from the people that we've gotten to meet for the last 10 years and just saying that in order for us to continue that, we definitely need to work together. It's not a one company or a one person thing. It's definitely all of us collectively working together to make a difference. And so with that, I really want to talk about a little bit of the history of active shooter and what we've seen in the past and what we're starting to see currently, and maybe give some education to some things that you might think are different than really what the reality is. And so a lot of us obviously know about Uvalde that just happened not too long ago. And I pose this question because I know it's an interesting question, but if there was an active shooter that happened tomorrow, what would you think that the news would say? We have seen over and over again, there's common things that happen. And so you guys can say it out loud if you want, but if you think, what would be something on the news that you would continuously see or hear on an active shooter event over and over again? Maybe we never thought it was going to happen here. Pretty common. Somebody saw something but never said anything to anybody else. How common is that? That's a pretty common thing, right? And I'm going to show you guys a video by Sandy Hook Promise. And it's not that school shootings are predictable, because they are unpredictable. But what happens during a shooting is usually the same things over and over again. It's usually the same failure points over and over again. And that's where we need to put our focus, is how do we make those failure points better?
I'm here at the scene of tomorrow's shooting, where a 15-year-old will kill 4 children, 2 adults, and then turn the gun on himself.
When the shooting starts happening tomorrow, first I'll probably just think it's firecrackers or car backfiring or something. He told some of us that his dad kept the gun in his closet, and he always talked about using it on, the people that bullied him. Tomorrow I'll probably say that I wish I told someone.
After the shooting, we're gonna feel pretty bad about picking on him, but until then, we'll probably just keep doing it because he's pretty weird.
Tomorrow I'll probably point out that something has seemed off with him since the beginning of the school year. And I'm now joined by the officers who will be the first responders tomorrow. What additional details can you share with us?
Well, someone is expected to tell us after the shooting that the shooter has been posting on social media about doing this for weeks.
So how will you explain the shooting to your daughter?
Actually, I won't get to explain it to her because she won't make it.
This is Christine Lynn, reporting from the scene of another shooting. We'll say we never saw nothing.
I have watched that video probably 1,000 times, and it doesn't get any easier, to be honest with you. It's a tough video to watch, and it's a reality that we're facing today in our kids' schools. And so I really wanted to start off by really educating you guys on what really means to be an active shooter, because through the 10 years, I've heard it never happens, it'll never happen here. Doesn't happen that often. Statistically, it's going down, and none of that's really true. And most of it, the confusion is because of the definition of active shooter has changed throughout the years. And you really need to understand why that happened. So over the years, we found that an active shooter definition used to be, anytime that there was a gun that was fired on school grounds, right? So a shooting happens on school grounds. It doesn't matter if one person's killed, 2 people are injured. That was what was considered a school shooting or an active shooter. The definition of an active shooter is somebody coming into a confined space to try to hurt somebody, to try to kill somebody. That's the true definition of active shooter. What happened over the years, former government administrations that we had, was you couldn't be an active shooter unless it was 4 or more that were killed. And so all of a sudden we started hearing that active shooters don't happen that often. It's not a common trend, because we were only starting to pull statistics based on shootings that were happening with 4 or more people killed in a school. And a lot of you guys, if you think, I'm sure raise a hand, how many of you guys have kids that are in schools right now, K through 12 schools? I'm sure there's a lot of you guys, right? If there was a gun that was fired on school grounds and nobody was injured and nobody was killed, you don't think that would drastically change a community, right? That would drastically change a community, even if nobody was killed or was injured. And so the statistics I'm going to go over with you guys today is based on a school shooting that happens anytime a school is fired on grounds. Doesn't matter if it's on a bus, a parking lot, after hours, inside the school. And the way that the government has defined it is there's school shootings, right? And so on the left side, you'll see school shootings, 1,550 incidents since 1970, and 545 people were killed and 1,546 people injured so far since 1970. Now, if you look at the other side, based on that definition of what the government has deemed as an active shooter, you'll see how drastically different that number is. 163 incidents and only 184 killed, 530 are injured. So if we merge those two together, because that's truly what is going on in our schools, is that it's not just 4 people, it could be 1 person, it could be 2 people. These are the real statistics based on the Center of Homeland Security and an organization called NSSPA that puts both of these together. And this is where we are currently since 1970. There's 1,713 K through 12 school shootings. 1,713 since 1970. 729 murdered, 2,076 were injured. 80% of the time, it's a former or current student. 80% of the time. And so when we do training here, across for Armored One or anybody else that does training, we shouldn't be training our students on what we're doing. We should only be training our teachers, because most of the time it's the student that's doing the attack. So currently during school, during when school days are in session, so not the summer, but during days that school is in session, average attack lasts 8 minutes. Every 60 seconds, someone is shot when an incident's happening. And it usually will happen every 8 days. So a lot of you guys are probably thinking to yourself, 8 days? I don't hear about school shootings every 8 days, right? That's because they're not reported every 8 days. Just by decades alone, we just pulled just for the 2000s, 2010s, and currently where we are right now, you have 337 shootings that happened in 2000s. During Sandy Hook in Parkland, that happened in the 2010 era. So 2012 was Sandy Hook, 2018 was Parkland. You had 429 shootings. Do you guys remember hearing about 429 shootings? Probably not. Just in 2020, so in 2021 and 2020, or sorry, 2020 and 2021, we have already had 40% of the shootings that happened in the last 10 years of the decade. During COVID, so during the time that schools are shut down, we are already projected to beat out last decade. How crazy is that? And we're not even halfway through the decade yet, and we're almost already halfway through the shootings. Currently in 2022, I know you guys have heard Uvalde, right? Obviously that's probably the most popular one, or the only one you guys might have heard, but there's already been 33 school shootings this year in 2022. So one of the things that we find is that if it's not relevant at that time, we tend to forget about things, right? Is there anybody here who can give me a school shooting that happened 20 years ago, prior to 2002? Go ahead. Columbine. Anybody else can think of any more? What's that? Springfield. Must be from that area. Not a lot of people know about that one. Yeah, it's crazy. So we don't know about these, but I want to point out a few things on. I'm going to go over a few of these incidents that have happened, and I'm going to highlight a couple points on those things. Columbine is one of the biggest ones, and when I talk about Columbine, I'll tell you why, because there was a shift in the way that we respond to that as SWAT team or officers respond to an attack, and it's all because of Columbine. But can anybody guess what year was the deadliest school shooting? What year? Anybody? Give me a date. I'm going to put it on you guys. I'm not going to move any further, and Irma's going to be mad that we're running behind. 2022. Anybody else? 2022. 1927 was the deadliest attack on a school that ever happened. And guess what? It was an Amish community. And it was a board member who was mad that his taxes went up, and he blew up the school. Didn't even use a gun. He ended up blowing up the school, killed 44 people, injured 58. 1927. So the thing that this is new, it's a relatively new event that's going on, is really not true. This has been like this for years. It's just that we're finally hearing more about it. We're having mental health issues that are more than ever, and it's happening more often, but it doesn't mean that it never happened prior to Columbine. It happened several times before Columbine. Jonesboro, Arkansas was probably one of the most popular ones for us who study active shooter. because we get a lot of pushback from school administrators where if a shooting's happening inside of a school, we are to stay inside the school, don't evacuate, right? So the Homeland Security has done the run, hide, fight. We try to take it another level. We do run, hide, barricade, fight, and I'll explain to you guys in the Parkland video why we recommend barricading as well. But it's this notion that if there's a shooting happening inside the school, we evacuate, there might be another shooter that's outside. It's only happened twice in history. So out of all of the school shootings since 1970, out of the 1,500 of them, or 1,700, sorry, plus that happened, only 2 of them were their second shooter. And so we push really hard on people to say, if you have the option to get out of the school, you should really get out of the school. That's part of what we do on our training side, is that you're safer outside of the school if the gunman's inside the school. If the gunman's outside of the school, then you're safer inside the school. And that's part of what we're trying to do, is making that school even safer. So when the gunman is outside of a building or outside of that classroom, we're trying to make that fenestration, that glass, even harder to get through and make them even more safe so they have the time to do what they need to do. So Jonesboro, Arkansas was an interesting event. The guy pulled the fire alarm, got everybody to start evacuating, and they were sitting outside, and then they started shooting people as they were coming out of the building. Columbine. So Columbine is probably the one that most people remember, unless you're really young and you weren't around when Columbine happened. But Columbine was an interesting attack, and I got a picture of glass here because I spent a lot of times dealing with architects. I'm on the technical side, so I have to deal with architects. And I can't tell you how many times they just focus on the main entranceway. We're going to do a secure vestibule, and that's all we're going to do, and we should be safe. These shooters can get through any entrance that has glass on it, that has a door that's not locked, right? It doesn't have to be the main entranceway. In Columbine, they were trying to go after the most amount of people. So this is actually a side entrance near the media library area, and the cafeteria is not that far. The cafeteria had 90 bombs, pipe bombs. They made 90 pipe bombs where 40 of them went off. And during that time, it used to be that when a police officer shows up on scene, that the police officer would have to wait for SWAT team to respond. And so it takes 40 minutes for SWAT team to respond. It could take up to longer depending on how rural the area is. And so, unfortunate event, but fortunately only 13 people were killed. I say only because they had 40 minutes in that building. They had all these bombs and only 40 of them went off. The building actually set fire. And I'm going to emphasize that because fire has done an amazing job, and life safety, protecting these schools against fire. We have done a terrible job at trying to prevent that, or try to protect our kids through security, through incidents like this. And so you had a building that was on fire. The only thing that melted was a chair during that fire. Everything else is fire rated, so we could have even had it worse if fire didn't do a good enough job at trying to protect these buildings like it has over the years. And so kudos to anybody who's been a part of that. I think now we got to do it for security as well. And so part of Columbine was after Columbine happened, a bunch of experts at Homeland Security got together, and they're the ones that run the SWAT teams, are the ones that give what they're supposed to do. They said they made a new rule that any police officer was allowed to go into a building without having the SWAT team there, that they have the option to go in. Now, there's a lot of bad police officers, and you're going to hear about it in some of these shootings that have happened where the SRO is running away from the scene. I know that firsthand, that there's not every single cop is great, right? And so just like in any industry that we're in, you're going to have the great ones and you're going to have the not so good ones. So, but they had the option to go in, which is why we drastically reduced the amount of time that it takes for an active shooter. We brought that down to 8 minutes. Now, fun statistic for anybody who wants it, but if you have an armed SRO inside your school, it goes from 8 minutes to 90 seconds, just by doing an armed SRO. No glass, no security standard, no blue light system, no means of communication, just by putting an armed security guard in the school, you end up bringing it from 8 minutes average TAC to 90 seconds. Again, I only give the actual data and statistics. I'm not doing it on how I feel or political stuff, right? So we just do it on stats. Sandy Hook. And this is probably the one that hits me the most because this is the reason why we started Armored One. And it's the most frustrating one to see over and over again after Sandy Hook. So Sandy Hook they had a secured vestibule. They had a camera system. They had a buzzer system. They had a greeter window. They had all the things that we recommend today. They were actually ahead of their time. And the guy ended up shooting next to the window on the main entrance, which is why we usually recommend if it's attached to the main entrance, you have to do those adjacent glass. And especially if it's a main entranceway, that's where we need to harden the most. And so he shoots one round with a 9mm, gets in 2.5 minutes, is able to kill 20 children, 6 adults, and then 2 more were injured. And so the part that's most frustrating is I gave you guys some statistics, right? 2010s. from that decade. There was 429 school shootings in that decade. After Sandy Hook, how many of you remember that we were never going to let this happen again? How many times did a politician get on the stupid TV and say, we're never going to let this happen again? It happened all the time, right? 429 shootings. We've had over 600 shootings since Sandy Hook, and we're still here talking about this, and not one single mandate, not one single standard for security against active shooters. I don't know if you guys, I guess you guys are sensing how pissed off I am, because we finally got away from like the sad side, like this is a sad event, but now we're pissed off that we're not doing anything about it, because that's our fault now. It's our fault as a society that we haven't done anything for these kids. Parkland, 2018, unlocked side door. Talking about it'll never happen here, right? They just left the side door unlocked because I don't know if how many of you guys know this, but 2 days before Parkland happened, it was rated the safest city in Florida. 2 days before Parkland happened. So of course you're gonna have the mentality, it's never gonna happen here, right? We're never gonna have an incident like this. The statistic of that happening in our community, it's most likely never gonna happen. They have 14 children killed, 2 adults were killed and 17 were injured. And I'm gonna walk you through the Parkland video, and it's not gory. Actually, you guys probably watch worse things on a Sunday night than what's happening here, but we're going to, I'll walk you through that video and you're gonna see how it's repetitive. In Parkland, there was a fire alarm that went off, and news rate said that, hey, that guy pulled the fire alarm. That's how it got set off, which is not true. It was set off by the smoke of the AR-15. But because the news reported it like that, another active shooter, literally 2-3 months later, had a brilliant idea to do the exact same thing that happened in Parkland, but he was going to pull the fire alarm. And so we did. And that's how you had Santa Fe actually get started. They pulled the fire alarm, people evacuated out of the rooms. He was able to kill 10, injure 13 more. And so one of the things that we recommend, and I know it's not the NGA thing, but one of the things we recommend is we somehow have to decipher the difference between a lockdown and a fire drill, having blue light systems that are separate. So if there's a lockdown going on, well, somebody else is pulling a fire alarm, one's got to override the other. We got to figure that out. So that's something that is happening over and over again. I don't have the solution to that, but that's what we can do as a society and come together and create a consensus way of merging those two worlds without stepping on each other's toes too much. Robb Elementary. So this, again, like I said, Sandy Hook, we weren't going to let it happen ever again in an elementary school. And you have just literally 2 months ago, we have Robb Elementary, Uvalde, we have another attack on a school. And this one was a little bit different. You know, there's different situations, different circumstances, but it goes exactly where what we've said all the time is that how can you harden the outside of your building if you haven't tested or done it the right way or making sure that it's really designed for an active shooter application? And that's our responsibility, is to make sure that these things are tested the right way, are the right products, because just taking something that was rated for safety for a different application doesn't necessarily mean it's going to hold up to a gun and be attacked. And so we need to make sure that we do something different or rate those products differently. So I want to go through the Parkland video really quick with you guys, because I think it's important. I started off this presentation basically showing you a video of how we've seen the same things happen and happen over and over again. And usually the news, when they report it, it's almost the same things that people are saying. And so I'm going to walk you through the Parkland video. It's going to be a basic one, but you're going to see that there's lack of active shooter training is one issue. Hardening of doors is another issue. And then also communication challenges. Being able to communicate what's going on effectively is extremely important during a shooting attack. And so there's no graphic where it looks, you know, nobody's actually being shot. All it is a floor plan, and then there's dots on the floor plan. And I'm going to go ahead and just narrate this, but the green dots are students, the blue ones are teachers, yellow one are injuries, purple are fatalities, and the black dot with a line is the actual shooter. So I told you guys that they had the side door unlocked. So this is the building 12, it's the freshman building. So you see the shooter on the right side, and he walks right into the building, goes right into the stairwell. And when I say that history repeats itself, I'm not joking here. You'll see that there's going to be a student that walks in and has a little bit of a talk with the shooter, and then you'll see that that student actually walks away. What that guy, what the shooter said to the student was, "You better get out of here, it's about to get messy." The exact same thing that was said in Columbine, the exact same thing. And so that student runs off. This day, they usually don't lock and shut their doors, but they had a fire drill that day, which required the school to lock all their doors and shut them. And what you're going to notice is that the guy never even enters into a classroom. He's able to shoot out the glass. It's just tempered glass, no rating to it whatsoever. It's a sprinkler at school, so they don't need fire rated glass. He shoots out the glass and sticks the gun into the glass, goes back and forth, and is able to go ahead and injure people and kill people. Now he's on the first floor. I want you guys to pay attention to the room numbers on the first floor. So you'll see that it's 1217. And as we move up the floors, as you see the shooter goes up, pay attention to what the room numbers are. And I'll ask you a question at the end of it. You guys are going to be quizzed a little bit on this. So he keeps going back and forth from side to side. Around this time is when the fire alarm gets set off. And like I said, it wasn't because of him pulling the fire alarm. It was because of the smoke from the AR-15 that triggered it. You guys probably remember the gym teacher who went in to try to save those kids, ended up dying, was called a hero. You'll see when he gets to the end, you'll see somebody running from the other side of the building. That's that teacher trying to save those kids. When the SROs were actually running away from that building and staying away from that building. When we get to the second floor, which is going to happen in here momentarily, pay attention. You're going to see that there's not any students. Doesn't look like there's any teachers. It just looks like an empty floor. And that's not the case. There were students and teachers in every single one of those rooms. You want to know why he didn't attack those rooms? Is because they were actually trained enough on that second floor to be able to barricade their doors. They covered up the light kits, and the shooter could not see into that classroom. A shooter will not, a typical shooter, a student shooter will not shoot what he can't see. We know that from the history. And so every single person on the second floor was saved because they heard the gunshots before the fire alarm was triggered. And so because they heard the gunshots, they were able to prepare for it. On the third floor, the floor that has the most amount of time to prepare themselves and to make sure that they can protect themselves in a way to save their own lives, they were the ones that were outside in the hallway because they only heard the fire alarm. They never heard the gunshots. You want to talk about how important communication is. Somebody on that first floor should have said there was an active shooter in the school to the people on the third floor. They would have had the most amount of time to prepare. And this is where we had the most deaths. So the shooter ends up going through the third floor, goes to the end, and what happens is he ends up actually going to the teacher's lounge, and he shoots out the glass. Now, this is Florida, so you have hurricane-resistant glass. And so he expected that glass just to break so he can shoot the students as they're running out, but the glass actually sprayed back, and because it was laminated, he wasn't able to see through the glass anymore. So he actually stopped shooting because he couldn't see what he was shooting. He ends up leaving that building, goes to a local Walmart where there was a Subway, ends up ordering himself a sub, and he was eating his sub when they caught him. That's how sick this kid is. And again, just like that video that I showed in the beginning, there was people who knew he had mental health issues. He was expelled at the time of this happening. He posted on social media. There's lack of communication in the school. They never thought it was going to happen there. They had their doors unlocked. They didn't have the right glass hardening. All the things that we would see over and over again that would happen to all these attacks. Uvalde is almost similar to this. You know, on a propped open door versus an unlocked door, it's still a start. So we cannot predict when a school shooting is going to happen. We can't predict where it's going to happen, but we can pretty much predict what's going to happen during that shooting when it starts. And that's where we need to put our focus. And that's where I think that we have been doing, most of our work is on the things that we can actually control today. There's a lot of things that we can't control today, but so in the military, in the police, when you go through a door, they call it a fatal funnel. And usually a fatal funnel is because you have to squeeze down. And then usually if somebody's trying to attack you from the inside, as you're going into a room, that's usually the most chances of having a fatality or getting injured or being shot at. So what we've done is we tried reversing that for the civilian side of things and make it so this is really a life opening. This is where we can protect life. Yes, it might be a fatal funnel to the police officers, but this is the places and areas that we can start hardening to create obstacles for these people. And that's not just the glass, right? We need to stop thinking about only putting ballistic rated glass in the door that's non-rated or in a frame that's non-rated. We need to think about the full assembly and making sure that full assembly is tested right. So it's the door, the lock, the frame, the vision kit, all the things that go into that door or the framing assembly, even the wall construction, because things are different in a CMU blocked wall versus a studded wall. There's big differences in the way that those should be tested. So one of the things I want to leave you guys off with is that I just shared probably one of the most sad, and probably made you guys angry, probably did a lot of, I just put you through a roller coaster of emotions. But one of the things that I want to just express to you guys is that we always seem to deem firefighters and police officers and SWAT team and EMT, there's always guys that we consider first responders. And I actually encourage you to all to stop thinking like that. I know that we can call them first responders, but really it's the people that start to be proactive that are the true first responders. NGA is going to be a true first responder. Architects who design these buildings are true first responders. All of us that are into glass manufacturing, into technology development that's trying to make things better, make it more affordable, we are all first responders to this because we're the only ones that can actually change the outcome of what happens. Police officers and firemen and EMT are only going to respond to what's already happening. The people inside that school are more of the first responders than those police officers are. They can change the outcome of what happens. Police officers can't. And so I'm saying this because I encourage every single one of you as you guys come across these projects to think about it in that way, that we have the opportunity to change the outcome. We have the opportunity to save lives.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different avenue to talk to you about the active shooter situation. My assignment from our technical director was a little different. It was to take a look at what information we have on school infrastructures to get us thinking about what we can do, where we can act, and with the information that Tino just gave us, how we want to think strategically as an association to attack this issue. So what we want to look at is the development of the international consensus standard, but also the infrastructure of schools. So the first segment of this presentation is going to look at what is available to us from an infrastructure standpoint. I will be the first one to tell you there is not a lot of current information. One of the issues that you have in looking at school security or any type of school infrastructure is that the 1918s, 1917 timeframe is when the last big study was done. A couple government agencies in 2020 have given some information, and I tried to pull the most recent information that's there. So let's get started on that. So some facts and needs from schools about the infrastructure. So the premise of schools, and this comes from the ASCE infrastructure report card, to serve their primary purpose and provide a safe and effective learning environment for the nation's K-12 students, public schools need to be in good condition. Keep that in mind. When we take a look at this, you also have to understand that public schools are the biggest sector of the infrastructure, with the exception of roads and highways. It is the second largest infrastructure that we have in this country. And remember, for them to be effective, they have to be in good condition. Some facts about American schools: there are 84,000 public schools. Out of those 84,000 public schools, there are 100,000 school buildings that we have to address. From that, 33% of those school buildings are portable buildings because they do not have the capacity to house the students in their permanent structures. So as we think about what we need to do, remember this: 84,000 schools, 100,000 schools, buildings, all with windows, doors, skylights, all the products that we supply. And then there's that 33% that's portable, which is a unique opportunity. 50 million souls in those buildings on a daily basis. 50 million. 50% of the buildings are 50 years old. And the key for us, when they're 60 years old, they typically become abandoned. What does that tell us we have to do in the next decade? And we don't have much time to do it. So the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, says that 54% of the school districts need to update some type of system. That system that they need to update is typically and primarily the HVAC system. So what does that have to do with glass? I don't know. Should we talk to ASHRAE? So we do have big impacts on that. So if they're having to address their HVAC system, how can we link to providing them more efficient glazing and also provide them protection at the same time? 41% of the school districts have at least 50% of their schools that need to have some type of systems adjusted or updated or modified. And over 25% of the schools need to update other things such as lighting fixtures, roofing, safety, and security needs. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. We also are going to compete with these needs to get our glazing and protective glazing in these facilities. So we need to be very creative and think about how are we going to address both needs of these schools, 100,000 buildings, guys. How are we going to address those needs and get those kids protected? The ASC also did the report card, and schools got a D+ in their report card. I know it's very difficult to see this, but it was the biggest I could make the snapshot. On the left-hand side, it says % of building systems and features in fair or poor condition. The number one item at 32% is windows. You go down to the next double star, it's energy management systems and security systems. You go down a little bit further, it's interior lighting, day lighting. And the next one's exterior walls and finishes. All of those areas are someplace that NGA can affect and can help. So if they need windows, let's bring on protective glazing. So that's just some statistics to let sink in and understand where we are. Now with that, there were some of us, as Tino said, maybe we got a little passionate, maybe we got a little pissed off, maybe we decided it was time to do something. Maybe it was a comment that was made at a conference that said, "Are you kidding me? We have standards to protect sea turtles and birds, but we don't have anything to protect our children. It's time that needs to change." So we developed a standard. The NGA, through an incredible amount of work that we will go through, looked at all kinds of standards, looked at everything that was going on, and decided we needed to do something. And so, acting as the first responder mentality, we took a look at it. We educated ourselves on school shooting occurrences, understanding what happened, where, when, and why, as best we could. Obviously, it's not as predictable as one would think. We reviewed all the existing security test methods that were out there, not only in ASTM, but in ISO, in the UK, the BSI, all of that kind of stuff, and we dredged through those. We looked at adapting and incorporating those existing methods because at the time we believed that we could extract materials from those and have something to the market rapidly. And we did the best we could to put that together. NGA did a fantastic job in putting together glass information bulletins to start the guidance on that. We looked at the performance awareness, and we had to look at budget considerations because that was some of the feedback we were getting, is that I cannot afford ballistic glass throughout my school. What was our response? We dug up this document from FEMA, started looking at that and understood that no, glass is not going to be the only thing that's going to be able to protect this and stop people from having these events. It is a multi-layered effect that you have to have, starting everything from the scenario and the planning of the land all the way up to where you put your shrubbery. All of that needs to be taken into account. We can't do all that, so we're going to do what we can. We raised awareness of the issue through seminars and workshops. We reviewed all the published data and tried to make sense of it and develop a path. We realized the gaps that were in the path that we were looking at, gathered the information, delved in, and responded. What we found fragmented methods that were published, and they served the needs for what they were published very, very well. Great standards, however, not great for what we were doing. We looked at the product knowledge gaps that were out there, looked at what needed to be had in a standard, which was repeatability and consistency. We looked at the needs again, and the actions, and we developed an updated guidance document. A couple of things that we also found is that we had to simplify the testing. In order for this to be broad spread, it had to be accessible. It had to be easy to do, easy to understand, and easy to replicate. So what were the attributes? We wanted to start with a security fenestration baseline, meaning the windows, doors, and all the products needed to have a forced entry rating before it started with this attack. We wanted to look at interior and exterior fenestration. We wanted to look at the commonly used weapons and projectiles. And that was unfortunately easier to find than we had hoped. It is not a ballistic standard or bulletproof standard. We wanted to simulate the weakening of the glazing, as Tino showed you, that they break into the glass and then the life opening that they get in. We wanted to use impact forces that were known to industry so that we didn't have to recreate, re-educate, and make aware of new test methods. Had to make sure it was mechanical and not human-driven to add variability for repeatability. And we had to give a range of performance options because one school can only afford potentially the low levels where another school may be able to go all the way to the high end. And you had to have variation in between that. So what did our timeline look like from concept to consensus? I would love to tell you this was a straight line. However, it looked more like this. But it is an amazing line because in November 2021, the draft was put at ASTM. ASTM welcomed us with open arms and said, absolutely. We had a lot of discussion on an emergency standard. Could it be pushed through as an emergency standard, and realized that, you know what, we're just going to go straight through the regular way, but really push it. And they agreed. They said, the minute you have a document ready, we will keep balloting it for you. So the first one in November 2021 was at the subcommittee level. And any of you that understand ASTM or participate in ASTM know that that's the first ballot level that happens. From that one, we had 1 negative and 8 comments. You must address all negatives through ASTM. And so we had a second ballot prepared January 2020. That went concurrently. Had that ballot passed with no negatives, we would have had a standard in January of 2020. We did have 2 negatives and 3 comments. And so we prepared another standard for March, another document for March. And that one went through with 1 negative and 1 comment. Again, had that negative been withdrawn, we would have been able to have a standard back in March. Then we had to wait for committee week because the negative commenter needed to have his comment adjudicated at the subcommittee. And then in June of 2020, we put in the last ballot, and that was a revision of a revision. And I am happy to say that through the balloting process, we have an approved ballot through the committee. Now, that doesn't mean it's published. What has to happen at this point is it has to go through society review, and that's what it is doing right now. ASTM has a mandate that when a standard is gone through all of the committee ballots, it has to then go through a society review. That gives the members of the ASTM committee a chance to actually comment on it. It lasts a month. And it will be done with society review on August 1st. Once it passes society review, then we can move to publication. Anticipating no comments, no negatives, and no issues with society review, I am happy to say and announce for the very first time that hopefully on August 1st, we will have a standard, publication number 3561, that it will be deemed the standard test method for forced entry resistance of fenestration systems after simulated active shooter attack. Now your questions. What the heck does this standard mean to me, right? What do I have to do? So let's just talk about what it entails. It's based on discussions at the NGA task group and what was formed from the GIB, which I said. Vetted throughout the ASTM process, so it's gone through multiple cycles. It simulates an active shooter by weakening the system. Note, I did not say ballistic resistant. The bullets are intended to go through. It's testing the forced entry, again, not the ballistic resistance of it. It's a rating for full fenestration products, systems. It's mechanically driven, so there's no human variable, and there's very, very clear pass-fail criteria So we do not have to leave it for interpretation. As I said, the systems have to be pre-qualified to these 3 standards. You will see the compass on there, and very shortly you will understand why. There are 10 shots with a single weapon and ammo type that are fired onto the glazing in the compass coordinates. That's why the compass was there. The only weapon and bullet that is used is the AR-15, and it's the 5.56 military round. We decided on that because the AR is the most common weapon used, and the 5.56 is actually a little bit more powerful bullet than the 193, which is another bullet that fits in the AR. We do impacts after weakening with a 100-pound impactor at the center. And it's a double tap, so you have to pass 2 impacts at that spot. There are 8 different drop heights for the impactor, so the impactor weight does not change. It's still 100 pounds, just like your shot bag for ANSI Z97, just a different form. We increase the force with the drop, and there is also a glass-only testing option for those of you that don't make systems but want to test and do some R&D on glass samples that may fit. And then there's a solid form 6-inch sphere that passes and fails. This is the impactor. The impactor is not new. It comes from ASTM 476 and has been used for many, many years. As I said, it's 100 pounds, which is the same as your ANSI Z97 shot bag. You impact the center of the glazing. If it is a door, you also impact the lock, and the lock area is also shot, by the way, if there is a lock. And 2 impacts per level. These are the impactor levels. So you can see there's 8 levels. They increase up from 50 foot-pounds all the way up to 400 foot-pounds with your drop height. And just before we get a little nervous on that, let's take a look at what that means. So if you look all the way at the far corner, the ANSI impact. So the first level is 1/3 the force of Class B ANSI. Okay, so it's not a huge impact. Now you are impacting weakened glass, but it's 1/3 that force. When you get to level 3, that is Class B. It's the same force as Class B. Level 4 is half the force of what Class A would be. And all the way up to level 8 is the same as dropping your shot bag from 48 inches. So we did not go outrageously crazy on these things, but we did give options so that the specifiers can look at risk, threat, and vulnerability and decide what they need and what they can afford for their projects. So a special thanks and congratulations on getting this formed to the ASTM F12 Security Committee, because without their willingness to help us move this along, and actually an incredible amount of work in that organization, there's no way we would have had a standard in ASTM from concept to near publication in less than 8 months. Think about how fast that is for any of you that have participated in ASTM. There are standards that have been going on for 11 years that I know of that still are nowhere near close. The other part is I want to thank the NGA School Security Task Group for the work that they've done. And this is such a significant event for us. So thank you all.
As Julia alluded to in her presentation, ASTM F3561-22 is officially published as of September 1st. Visit astm.org and type the standard number into the search field, or scan the QR code on the screen to be taken directly to the standards webpage. NGA's Advocacy Committee has been active drafting notices of the new standard, as well as formalizing a one-pager on school security, Windows Respond First. This is now one of 4 one-pagers available for the industry to use when advocating and communicating with building code officials, designers, architects, specifiers, building owners, and any other interested party. They detail the request, the issue, and the strategy in a direct, condensed format. Download both resources at glass.org/IYOG. We also encourage you to visit the advocacy webpage listed on the screen for additional tools. In addition, the Advocacy Committee has been actively monitoring the progress and recent signage of the new bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Within is the Luke and Alex School Safety Act of 2022. In it, it outlines that a clearinghouse will be established and serve as a federal resource to identify and publish online through schoolsafety.gov or any successor website, evidence-based practices and recommendations to improve school safety for use by state and local educational agencies, institutions of higher education, state and local law enforcement agencies, health professionals, and the general public. Further, the bill specifies the criteria for best practices and recommendations of the clearinghouse, including evidence that the best practice or recommendation has had a significant effect on improving the health, safety, and welfare of individuals in school settings. Finally, the bill provides for grant program review. NGA has also published 2 GLASS technical papers internally on the topics of security, for which the QR codes are on the screen. We hope you'll take a look. NGA also has members collaborating on an active task group to develop an AIA presentation on school security using the existing GLASS technical papers and related information available. If you are an NGA member and are interested in participating, please scan the QR code on screen to reach Amber Johnson in the Advocacy and Technical Department, or email her directly at ajohnson@glass.org. We hope you enjoyed this session. If you have specific questions with regard to what was presented, please feel free to contact Tino or Julia directly using the email addresses on screen. Thank you for joining us. This recording will be posted within 24 hours to glass.org/on-demand-webinars. We look forward to seeing you again soon at a future NGA event.